the perception of a cyber criminal or a hacker and what they get up to, it's a little bit skewed, isn't it? Because I think we've changed from someone in a basement somewhere in a dark room with lots of screens surrounding them. It's sort of changed in the way that these ransomware groups operate. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. So the media, they always portray teenagers wearing hoodies in basements. It's usually dimly lit, but I'm not really sure why that is the case. But the reality doesn't look like that at all. And I think actually we do ourselves something of a disservice by looking at hackers in that way and cyber criminals in that way, because it totally belies the actual scale of the cybercrime industry. And I've deliberately used the word industry because that is the reality that we face. At Sophos, we have a unit called the Counter Threat Unit, and they are tasked with monitoring the cyber criminal world and their underground activities very, very closely. And from the research that we conduct, you can actually see that essentially all major ransomware has been delivered by one of just a handful of very, very skilled and very organized cybercrime gangs. So this kind of perception that you're dealing with individuals who are, socially awkward and operate in isolation is absolutely not the case at all. In almost every case, it's a major gang, and it's really important to understand that this is people's 9 to 5s. We actually look at the initial phases of attacks, and if you map it by adjusting by 3 hours from Moscow time to UK time, what you see is cybercriminals rolling up to work at 9 o'clock and checking their emails and being actually quite productive between the hours of 10 and 11, taking a pause for lunch, and then coming back refreshed and actually going at it again early afternoon, and then clocking out about 5 o'clock. And interestingly, just as a fun exercise, I got a graph of sales development representative productivity by time and mapped it against cybercrime, and it's a literal exact match. So it is people's 9 to 5 job, and we actually know a lot about the underlying structures of cybercrime gangs because of one really interesting event that occurred in the world of cyber criminal activity. And I'm alluding here to the demise of a gang known as Conti. So I'm winding the clock back a bit, but this is still quite an interesting story, and it's given us probably the best peek into how cybercrime gangs operate. So Conti was a Russian headquartered cybercrime gang, a very successful gang, but many of the affiliates that actually associated themselves with Conti were actually Ukrainian citizens. And a lot of disruption was caused when Conti announced very publicly that they would support Russia's activity in the Ukraine using cyber means, and they would respond to, in inverted commas, Western aggressors. Now, as you can imagine, the Ukrainian contingent wasn't massively on board with that particular message, and after a little bit of infighting, basically Conti spilled its guts across the internet, and there was this huge volume of data that was leaked. We're talking about people's personal names, email addresses, contact details, alleged links to various organizations inside Russia, but also just mundane internal communications that tell us that if you're part of a cybercrime gang, you've probably got a line manager, you've probably got a monthly target, you have a monthly salary, there is opportunities for career progression, there's a marketing department, there's basically everything you find in a legitimate business except the way they actually go about making their money. And it just shows how incredibly sophisticated they can be, and how gangs actually share intel with one another. And this is a trend that we've seen over and over again. So although Conti ultimately disintegrated, because of the way that cyber criminals operate with this high level of immunity from any form of justice, and then actually the key leaders and protagonists they just move between gangs. There is actually like an internal labor market. So if you happen to have hacker skills, then you can kind of choose which gang you want to align to, and gangs will actually basically advertise and compete for offering you the best terms and the best packages. So that you can kind of migrate between the two. And we almost feel like we're playing a bit of a game of gang whack-a-mole, because it's incredibly difficult to take these people down because of where they're geographically located. And if they do fall apart of their own volition or through external activity, and another gang just pops up. So it is this constant cycle of whack-a-mole over and over again. Unfortunately, that is the reality that we operate in, and you can see this kind of immunity from prosecution, particularly when you look. There's a couple of videos kicking around on YouTube which are not too difficult to find, where you'll see members of the gang E Corp, for example, driving around in Lamborghinis and similarly exotic cars, all brightly decorated in urban camouflage color schemes, and one of them actually has a number plate on it that translates to thief, and there's a video of them doing donuts around police cars in the streets of Moscow. So these people are literally untouchable.